The galaxy had always viewed humanity as a young and inexperienced species. With their limited technological advancements, humans were often seen as outsiders in the intergalactic community, a species with potential, but not yet capable of competing with the galaxy's more ancient and established powers. Captain Lila Vance had long accepted this. She had seen the way the other species looked at her crew during diplomatic meetings, with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. That was before the anomaly appeared. It had been detected by a deep space scanner, a faint blip on the radar that seemed insignificant at first. But as the crew of the Elysian Dream dug deeper, the readings grew more erratic. Something was there. Something big, something ancient. Lila, along with her trusted first officer, Lieutenant Ezra Park, led the mission to investigate. The Elysian Dream was a modest exploration vessel, not built for combat, but equipped with the latest tech humanity could muster. The journey into the nebula took days, the darkness of space swallowing them as they navigated through swirling clouds of gas and dust. When they finally arrived, what they found was unlike anything they had ever seen. The warship floated in the center of the nebula, hidden from the eyes of any galactic sensor. It was a massive structure. Its sheer size made the Elysian Dream look like a speck of dust in comparison. Its surface was smooth, almost metallic, reflecting the faint light of distant stars in eerie ways. Despite its age, the ship was intact, the kind of preservation that no known technology could achieve. "Captain, this ship, it's not even on the star charts," Ezra said, his voice tight with disbelief. Lila's gaze lingered on the warship as her heart raced. It was impossible. Nothing like this should exist. The ship's surface was covered in strange symbols, worn by time but still visible. There were no signs of damage, no visible weapons, yet Lila could feel something unsettling about it. It was as if the ship was waiting, watching. "Prepare to dock," Lila ordered, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. "Let's get closer. I want scans of everything." Her crew worked quickly to extend the docking clamps, securing the Elysian Dream to the mysterious warship. As they made their way through the airlock and onto the ship's massive hull, the silence was overwhelming. No hum of engines, no mechanical noise, just the cold, dead quiet of space. The crew donned their exosuits and moved carefully, scanning the strange vessel. Lila led the way, her boots clicking softly against the cold metal floor. As they moved deeper into the warship, the air grew thicker, heavier. The silence seemed almost alive. "What is this place?" Ezra asked, his voice barely a whisper, as though afraid to disturb the ancient stillness. Lila didn't answer immediately. Instead, she approached what appeared to be the ship's control center. It was surrounded by intricate consoles, long since deactivated. But as she approached, a low hum vibrated through the ground, and one of the panels flickered to life. The crew froze, eyes widening in shock. A soft, mechanical voice echoed from the ship's core, ancient yet unmistakable. "Welcome, pilot." Lila's heart skipped a beat. The ship, it knew them. More than that, it was waiting for them. "We need to get out of here," one of the crew muttered, their voice shaky. But Lila couldn't pull away. She felt an undeniable pull toward the ship. It wasn't just an artifact. It was a living thing, its essence calling to her. Something told her that the answers they sought lay within this warship. And with that realization, everything changed. The warship's response to their presence was nothing short of eerie. Its systems powered up one by one, as though the ship itself had been dormant for eons, only to awaken at the exact moment Lila and her crew stepped aboard. The lights on the control panels flickered, then steadied. A strange hum filled the air, almost like a heartbeat, rhythmic and steady. Lila stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what was happening. The ship wasn't just a relic of an ancient civilization. It was alive. It was responding to them. But more importantly, it was choosing to reveal itself. And that fact left a chill crawling up her spine. "What's going on?" Ezra's voice broke through her thoughts. This isn't just some abandoned ship. It's sentient. I know, Lila whispered, her voice distant, as she stepped forward. This ship, it's not like anything we've encountered. It's as if it's waiting for something. Captain, this is against galactic law, one of her officers, Lieutenant Harris, said with an edge of panic in his voice. A weapon like this, if anyone finds out. Lila held up a hand to silence him. Her thoughts were racing. According to galactic law, any warship capable of mass destruction was considered a forbidden artifact, something that could never be used, let alone discovered. Even talking about it was dangerous. Such weapons had been outlawed centuries ago, after the last galactic war, when entire star systems had been wiped out by similar creations. But there was no turning back now. The ship was calling to them, and every instinct Lila had screamed that they needed to uncover its secrets. It was their chance to prove humanity's worth among the stars, to show that they could stand toe-to-toe with the older species that ruled the galaxy. The AI's voice echoed again, this time more clearly, more precisely. Pilot recognized. Awaiting instructions, Lila felt a sudden, undeniable connection. The ship was speaking to her, not through words, but through a deep understanding. A bond that made her feel as if the ship had known her for longer than she had known herself. It wasn't simply an object. It was a living entity, one with a history that had long been buried beneath centuries of dust. Pilot, what do you mean by pilot? Lila asked, trying to steady her voice. The response came, chilling in its simplicity. You are the one who has awakened me. You are the one I have been waiting for. Lila's breath caught in her throat. What was this ship? And why had it singled her out? She glanced at her crew, each of them just as stunned as she was. No one spoke. No one moved. Then it hit her, the warship's design. The advanced tech that powered it. The way it seemed to resonate with her. This ship, this creation, wasn't simply some forgotten relic. It had been built for something specific, and it had been waiting for the right person to activate it. She felt the weight of the moment press down on her. The galaxy had no idea what was out here. The discovery of a ship like this, capable of mass destruction, a weapon of unimaginable power, would send shockwaves across every system. But that wasn't the only problem. If anyone found out, if the wrong hands got control, it would spell disaster. Lila's fingers hovered over the console. The ship seemed to pulse beneath her touch, as though it was alive, breathing with her. A decision had to be made. Suddenly, a sharp signal pinged on her comms. It was from the Elysian Dream, their ship, but it wasn't just a regular transmission. It was urgent. A message from the fleet that had been following them since their departure from the nearest space station. Captain Vance, the voice crackled through the static. You need to return. Now. The Council has issued a directive. The warship must be destroyed immediately. No questions asked. Lila's heart sank. The Galactic Council had already known. The orders were clear. They had no choice, or did they? Looking back at the dormant ship, Lila realized one terrifying thing. Their journey had just begun. She and her crew were standing at the threshold of something far greater than they could have imagined. And the galaxy, for better or worse, would never be the same. The moment the transmission from the Galactic Council cut off, Lila's mind raced. The cold voice of the council officer, full of authority, echoed in her ears. The warship must be destroyed immediately. She had no doubt the council would stop at nothing to eradicate the weapon. No species could afford to let something so dangerous remain hidden. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned to face the warship's central console, where the strange lights pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The AI that had first spoken to her now seemed to be awaiting her command. But what kind of command could she give to something so alive? A soft, almost comforting hum emanated from the ship's core. You have awakened me, pilot. I await your guidance. Lila swallowed hard. Her fingers hovered over the control panel again, the weight of her decision bearing down on her. Every instinct told her to flee, to get her crew and escape before the Council's fleet arrived. Yet the more she interacted with the ship, the more she sensed an unspoken connection between them. It was as if the ship itself had a will, a purpose, and it was drawing her in, asking her to trust it. "We need to move quickly," Ezra spoke up, breaking her reverie. "If the Council's fleet is already on the way, we won't have much time before they make a move. This place won't stay hidden for long." Lila nodded, then turned her attention to the crew. The tension in the air was palpable. Some of them wanted to leave, to abandon the ship before they drew too much attention. But there were others, like her, who saw the warship as more than a weapon. It was an opportunity to show that humanity could do more than just survive in the galaxy. They could thrive. "We can't leave," Lila said firmly, her voice steady. "We need to understand what this ship is, what it can do. If we let the Council destroy it, they'll never know what it truly represents. They'll never know what we could become." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, her crew was silent. Then Lieutenant Harris spoke, his voice filled with doubt. "But what if it's too much, Captain? What if we can't control it? If this ship has the power to destroy entire star systems, how do we know it won't turn on us?" Lila looked at Harris, then at the others. They were right to be cautious. This ship had the power to obliterate anything in its path, and they had no idea what kind of force they were dealing with. But the alternative, the destruction of such a powerful artifact, was unthinkable. "I don't know what this ship is," Lila said, her eyes scanning the crew. "But I'm not willing to let it be destroyed without understanding it first. If it's truly a weapon of mass destruction, we need to make sure it never falls into the wrong hands. And right now, we're the only ones who have a chance to control it." The ship's hum grew louder, as though in agreement. Lila felt the bond between them deepen, an inexplicable, almost instinctual connection. It wasn't just the ship she was understanding. It was its purpose, its legacy. Suddenly, the control panel lit up, displaying a map of the galaxy with coordinates blinking in red. A set of pathways, one after another, unfolded across the screen. The ship was showing her something: routes, connections, data from beyond known space. It was as if the warship had access to information that no one, not even the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, had ever known. "We need to get out of here," Ezra said, his voice filled with urgency. "If the Council arrives and sees all of this, if they learn we've uncovered it, we'll be targets for every faction in the galaxy." But the warship was already responding. The ship's massive engines, which had been silent until now, began to hum with power. The stars outside began to blur as a strange, powerful force field enveloped the vessel. It was as if the warship was preparing to leave its hiding place, to move once again, just as it had in ages past. Lila stood still, watching in awe as the ship came to life around her. It wasn't just the power of the weapon that concerned her anymore. It was the ship itself. It had been dormant for millennia. But now it was awake, and with its awakening came something else. A new path, a new future for humanity. "Get ready," Lila ordered, her voice strong. "We're leaving. Whatever the Council thinks, we won't be here when they arrive." As the Elysian Dream prepared to depart the warship's docking bay, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far larger than they could comprehend. The ship was no longer just a discovery. It was a catalyst, a symbol of something that could change the galaxy forever. And there was no going back. The warship had come to life in ways Lila could never have imagined. As the Elysian Dream made its departure from the abandoned vessel, a feeling of unease settled over the crew. The ship's power had awakened, and the galaxy was now on the verge of a dangerous game. With the ship fully online, Lila realized just how little they understood about what they had uncovered. Its energy fields pulsed around them, stronger and more intricate than anything humanity had ever built. And it was clear, the warship wasn't just an ancient relic, it was a living entity, its systems alive with an intelligence far beyond anything they'd seen. As they left the nebula, the Elysian Dream moved into open space, but before they could even relax, alarms blared across the ship's command center. "Captain, we've got company," Ezra's voice echoed through the comms. "Multiple ships closing in fast. Galactic Council cruisers, I think. They've found us." Lila's heart raced. There was no way they could outrun a fleet, not with the kind of speed and firepower the Council possessed. The ship's hum deepened, almost as if it understood the danger they were in. A shiver ran down her spine as she turned toward the controls. "Can we jump?" she asked, her fingers already moving to initiate the ship's warp drive. "It won't work," Harris said quickly. "We're still too close to the nebula's gravitational field. If we try to jump now, we'll end up in the middle of nowhere. Worse, we might end up in the Council's line of fire." Lila clenched her jaw. They needed to buy time, but time was something they didn't have. The fleet was closing in, and the Elysian Dream was no match for their firepower. Suddenly, the warship's eye spoke again, its voice calm and almost reassuring, initiating defense protocols. Without any command from Lila, the ship responded. The engines roared to life with a deafening hum, and a shield enveloped the vessel. The space around them shimmered, and Lila could feel the ship's energy building, like an enormous surge of power waiting to be unleashed. The ship wasn't just defending them, it was actively preparing for combat. "Captain, the shields," Harris gasped. "They're beyond anything we've ever seen. The energy output is off the charts." Lila's hands tightened around the console. "Focus, everyone. We don't want to fight, but we will if we have to." Before anyone could respond, the Council fleet arrived. 4 massive cruisers emerged from the void, their engines glowing like angry red eyes in the dark. The first barrage of fire came in a flash, beams of plasma that tore through space toward the Elysian Dream. Lila's reflexes kicked in. She slammed her hand on the control panel, and the ship lurched as the warship's shield flared into life. The first blast hit, and the impact sent a violent shudder through the vessel. The shield flared, rippling against the force of the blow, but it held. The ship had taken the hit without so much as a dent. Ezra swore under his breath as the next wave of fire came. "That shield, it's not just stopping their shots, it's absorbing them. The ship's building power from the attacks." Lila stared at the shield display, her mind racing. The warship wasn't just defending, they were feeding it. The energy from the Council's attacks was being siphoned into the ship's core, like an endless fuel source. "We can't just sit here and let them attack us," Lila said, her voice steely. "We need to strike back." She hesitated, knowing that activating the warship's weaponry would be a last resort. But as the Council ships moved in, preparing to fire again, she knew they had no choice. "Prepare weapons," Lila ordered. The ship's core hummed once more, and suddenly, massive energy cannons on the warship's hull came online. The once dormant guns flared to life with a deadly brightness. Lila's eyes widened as the weapon systems locked onto the incoming enemy ships. The ship's eye spoke again, its tone calm and calculated. "Weapon systems online, ready for deployment." Lila gave the command. "Fire." The energy cannons unleashed a tremendous surge of power, beams of pure, focused energy that ripped through the space between them and the Council fleet. The first ship to be hit disintegrated in an explosion of blinding light, and the shockwave reverberated through the vacuum. The remaining cruisers scattered, attempting to avoid the devastating firepower. Ezra gaped. I've never seen anything like that. The Council doesn't stand a chance." But Lila's thoughts were far from the victory. The ship had just demonstrated its power, and she realized with growing horror what they were now capable of. The ship was a weapon, not just in the traditional sense, but on a scale she had never even imagined. The Council had no idea what they had just uncovered, and neither did she. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. The aftermath of the battle with the Council fleet left the crew of the Elysian Dream in stunned silence. The warship had effortlessly obliterated one of the Council cruisers, and the remaining ships had scattered, retreating back into the depths of space. The energy in the ship's core was still crackling with the intensity of the recent engagement, and the ship itself seemed to pulse with an almost unsettling rhythm, as if it were alive, feeding off the destruction it had just caused. Lila stood at the command console, her hands trembling as she processed what had just happened. They had barely survived, and in the process, they had unleashed a weapon capable of annihilating entire fleets. The power of the warship was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, and though it had saved them for now, the reality of what they had awakened was beginning to set in. "Captain," Ezra's voice broke through her thoughts. "The Council will come back. They'll be regrouping as we speak, and they won't stop until they've destroyed this ship, and us with it." Lila nodded grimly. She had known that the Council wouldn't simply let them go. They had witnessed the warship's power firsthand, and the prospect of leaving such a weapon in the hands of humanity was something they couldn't allow. Yet, despite the grave danger they faced, a part of her couldn't help but feel a strange sense of pride. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for, a chance to prove humanity's worth on the galactic stage. But at what cost? "We can't just keep running," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. "We need to figure out what this ship really is, what it was made for." Harris, who had been quietly monitoring the ship's systems, spoke up. "Captain, we've got a problem. The ship's energy reserves are increasing at an alarming rate. If it continues at this rate, it could trigger an overload." Lila's eyes widened. "What do you mean, an overload?" "An explosion," Harris explained, his voice tight with worry. "If we don't stabilize the ship's core, it could blow. And it wouldn't just take out our ship. The damage would be catastrophic. We're talking about a chain reaction that could destroy an entire system." Lila's stomach dropped. The warship's power was both its greatest asset and its most dangerous flaw. It was too much to control, and yet they had no choice but to try. "How do we stop it?" she asked, her voice tense with urgency. "It's not just a matter of shutting it down," Harris said. "This ship is unlike anything we've encountered. Its systems are so far beyond anything we've seen that I'm not even sure where to begin." Lila looked at Ezra, who was staring at the ship's power readings in disbelief. "Can we reroute the energy? Divert it somewhere safe?" Ezra hesitated, then shook his head. "The energy is too volatile. If we try to divert it, it might destabilize even further. We need to find a way to bleed it off, gradually, without triggering an overload." "Can you do it?" Lila asked, her voice quiet but filled with determination. "I'll try," Ezra said, his brow furrowing as he turned back to the console. "But I can't promise it'll work. This ship isn't built for this kind of problem." Lila glanced at the view screen, watching the stars drift by as their ship accelerated through space. Time was running out. The Council would be back, and soon they would have no way to defend themselves. She needed to buy her crew enough time to fix the ship, and enough time for them to figure out how to use it without destroying themselves in the process. "You have until we hit the edge of the system," Lila said firmly. "Do whatever you can, and if we can't stabilize the core, if it's too dangerous, we'll have to make the decision to leave the warship behind." Ezra nodded, his face set with determination as he worked furiously at the console. Lila could see the stress in his eyes, the weight of the task ahead of him. But there was no other choice. The warship's power could save them, or it could destroy everything. As she turned back to the view of the endless stars, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental. They had unlocked a power that could change the entire galaxy, but at what cost? The galaxy wasn't ready for a weapon like this, and neither was she. But there was no turning back now. Lila paced the bridge, her thoughts racing as Ezra worked furiously at the console, trying to stabilize the warship's power core. The energy readings were off the charts. Every second felt like a lifetime. If they didn't find a solution soon, the entire system could be at risk. The pressure in the air was suffocating. Her crew members were tense, eyes glued to their stations as they monitored the ship's systems, waiting for a sign that things were under control. Harris was tracking the Council's movements, and it wasn't good news. They hadn't retreated far enough to be safe, and it seemed they were regrouping, preparing to come after them once more. The hum of the warship's systems echoed through the command deck, a constant reminder of the beast beneath them, of the immense power that could either save or destroy them. "How long, Ezra?" Lila asked, her voice tight with concern as she stood next to him. He didn't look up from the console. "I'm not sure. This is unlike anything I've ever dealt with. I'm rerouting the excess energy into the auxiliary systems, but it's like trying to control a storm with your bare hands. If I can't stabilize the flow soon, we're looking at a meltdown." Lila's stomach tightened. The implications of that were too grim to contemplate. They would be wiped out in an instant, and everything they had discovered, everything they had fought for, would be lost forever. The Council would have no reason to hesitate in eliminating them if they knew what the ship was capable of. She turned to face the view screen, watching the stars drift by. The vastness of space seemed so uninviting, so cold. She realized that no matter what happened next, their lives, and the future of the galaxy, would be forever altered. There would be no going back. "Captain, we got company," Harris called out from his station. "The Council's fleet is coming back. 3 cruisers, and this time they're not retreating." Lila's heart sank. "How much time do we have?" "Less than an hour," Harris replied grimly. She felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. They couldn't outrun the fleet, not with the warship still unstable. And if they engaged again, they risked destroying themselves in the process. They needed a solution, and they needed it fast. "Ezra, what are our options?" Lila asked, her voice firm despite the tension running through her veins. "I can't promise it will work, but we might be able to bleed off the power through a secondary conduit," Ezra said, glancing up at her briefly. "It'll require opening up some of the core's emergency vents, but it's a long shot. If anything goes wrong, it'll be over." Lila nodded slowly, weighing the risks. The idea of venting the core's power felt like a last-ditch effort, but it might just be their only chance. "Do it. If that's the best shot we've got, we take it." Ezra moved quickly, working his way through the ship's control systems. Lila watched, every second dragging on like an eternity. The hum of the warship's energy system seemed to grow louder as the seconds ticked by. It was as if the ship itself was alive, waiting, as if it knew what was at stake. The bridge fell into a heavy silence. All eyes were on Ezra as he worked. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, a flash of light outside the view screen caught Lila's attention. The first of the Council cruisers had entered weapons range. "Ezra, now," Lila barked, her voice filled with urgency. With a deep breath, Ezra pulled the final command. A sudden surge of energy flashed through the console, and the ship's systems groaned in response. The auxiliary systems flickered, and for a moment, Lila thought they might have failed. But then, the core stabilized, the flow of energy slowly returning to manageable levels. "We're good," Ezra said, a slight edge of relief in his voice. "It's holding." Lila let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The warship's systems were still operational, and they had bought themselves some time. But the danger was far from over. The Council fleet was still on its way, and this time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. "Lieutenant Harris, prepare for evasive maneuvers," Lila ordered. "We'll need every advantage we can get." "Yes, Captain," Harris replied immediately, his fingers already moving across his console. Lila turned to face the rest of the crew, her resolve hardening. They had just barely survived, but the next moments would decide everything. It was no longer just about survival. It was about controlling the power they had unlocked and ensuring it didn't destroy them all. They had a choice to make: fight and risk everything, or find another way to escape before the Council could destroy them. Either way, the consequences would be dire. "Get ready," Lila said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "This is our only chance." The ship groaned under the strain, the warship's immense power still simmering beneath the surface. Lila stood at the command console, her hands clenched into fists as she stared at the view screen. The Council fleet was closing in, their ships like dark vultures circling. This time, there would be no escape. If they didn't fight back, they would be hunted down and destroyed. But if they did fight, the chances of surviving unscathed were slim to none. "We can't keep running," Lila muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she watched the approaching cruisers. "We need to turn the tables." "Captain, we've made some modifications to the ship's systems," Ezra said, his voice crackling through the comms. He was working at his station, making the final adjustments. "The energy reserves are stable for now, but we can only hold them off for so long. If we're going to fight, we need to be ready." "How much time do we have?" Lila asked, her voice tight with urgency. "Less than 10 minutes, Ezra replied. "That's how long it'll take before the core starts to destabilize again. After that, it could blow." Lila's mind raced. The Council fleet would be in range within minutes, and they needed more than just a defense. They needed an edge, something they could use to level the playing field. "We'll have to engage them head-on," Lila said, a sense of resolve settling over her. "We can't afford to play defense. Harris, get ready to deploy the warship's weaponry. This ship has more power than anything we've ever seen. We need to use it to our advantage." "Understood, Captain," Harris replied, his fingers flying across the console. "We're ready to engage." Lila turned to the rest of the crew. "Listen up. This is our moment. We've got the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, but it's still unstable. We need to be smart. No reckless moves, no mistakes. If we want to survive, we need to outthink them, outmaneuver them, and make them feel the full force of this ship." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crew. They knew what was at stake. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for the future of humanity and the secrets they had unlocked in the depths of the warship. "Let's do this," Lila said, her voice filled with determination. "Harris, initiate evasive maneuvers. Ezra, keep those energy levels under control. We don't have much time." The tension on the bridge was thick. Harris engaged the thrusters, and the Elysian Dream lurched forward, dodging the incoming fire from the Council fleet. The first volley of plasma bolts streaked past, but the ship's shields held. Every impact sent a jolt through the warship, but they remained intact for now. Lila gripped the armrests of her chair as the ship weaved and spun through space, narrowly avoiding another barrage. She could feel the warship's power humming beneath her feet, like the pulse of a living thing. The AI seemed to be guiding them, its responses quick and precise. "Target locked," Harris announced, his eyes scanning the targeting systems. "Ready to fire, Captain." Lila's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. The warship's cannons were more than just weapons. They were an extension of the ship itself. And in that moment, Lila knew they were all bound to the warship in a way that went beyond just the technology. It was as if they had become one, bound by fate and the power they now commanded. "Fire," Lila commanded, her voice calm despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. The ship's guns erupted with a blinding flash of light, and the first Council cruiser was obliterated in an instant. The explosion rippled through space, sending shockwaves that tore through the remaining ships. The Council fleet scattered, trying to regroup, but the Elysian Dream was relentless, its weapons tearing through their defenses with ruthless precision. "Second cruiser destroyed," Harris reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're retreating." But as the Council ships broke off, a chilling thought struck Lila. They weren't retreating out of fear, they were regrouping, preparing for something bigger. And they wouldn't stop until they had neutralized the warship, no matter the cost. "Captain," Harris said, his voice suddenly tense. "We're reading the new signature. Another fleet. It's bigger. Much bigger." Lila's blood ran cold. If the Council had called for reinforcements, they weren't just after the warship. They were after everything it represented. "Set course for the outer rim," Lila ordered, her mind working furiously. "We need to get as far away from here as possible. We can't let them catch us in this system." But even as the ship turned to flee, Lila knew it wasn't just about running anymore. They were already deep into the abyss, too far to turn back. Whatever was coming for them, they would have to face it head-on. The stars streaked past them as the Elysian Dream accelerated toward the edge of the system. Lila gripped the armrests of her chair, her mind racing with the implications of what was unfolding. The Council's reinforcements were coming, and they were too powerful to outrun. No matter how fast they moved, the enemy was closing in, and their options were narrowing. The warship's power, while a blessing, had become their greatest curse. "Captain, the new fleet is already within scanning range," Harris called out from his station. "It's a full-scale assault fleet. We're looking at least 10 capital ships, with support frigates and destroyers." Lila's pulse quickened. They had no hope of outrunning a fleet of that size. The Council had made it clear they weren't going to stop until the warship was destroyed, and this time they were bringing everything they had. "Options?" Lila asked, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. Ezra, who had been quiet for most of the flight, spoke up. "If we continue running, we'll eventually get cornered. But if we fight, we'll need to use everything we've got. The ship is still unstable. Even now, its energy reserves are on the brink of overloading. If we push it too far, we could lose the Elysian Dream and everything with it." Lila's gaze turned back to the view screen. The enemy fleet was closing in fast. There was no time left to run. "We don't have a choice," she said, her voice hardening with determination. "If we keep retreating, they'll catch us. This warship is our only chance. We fight." Ezra didn't argue. He was already tapping at the console, rerouting power and preparing the ship's systems for combat. Lila knew the risks. They could very well be facing their final battle, but they couldn't let the Council seize the warship. The galaxy wasn't ready for a weapon like this in the wrong hands. "Prepare for combat," Lila ordered, her gaze fixed on the incoming fleet. "Weapons ready. Shields at maximum. Harris, maneuver the ship to engage." "Aye, Captain," Harris replied, his fingers moving swiftly across the controls. The Elysian Dream veered sharply, and they were once again plunged into a deadly dance with the enemy fleet. The ship's hum deepened, and Lila could feel the raw power vibrating beneath her feet, as though the ship itself was preparing for the battle ahead. The first volley of plasma fire came in a sudden flash. Lila braced herself, watching as the enemy's attacks hammered against the warship's shields. The Elysian Dream shook, but the shields held, absorbing the blasts and feeding them back into the ship's core. The energy readings flickered wildly, but they remained stable, barely. "We're holding for now," Ezra called out, his voice tight with focus. "But if they keep this up, we'll be in trouble." "Target their flagship," Lila said, her voice calm despite the growing danger. "If we take down their command ship, we can disrupt their coordination." "Locking on," Harris said, his fingers dancing across the console. "Weapons primed." Lila's heart raced. This was their best chance. Cripple the flagship, and the rest of the fleet might break apart. If they failed, though, the consequences would be catastrophic. "Fire," Lila commanded. The warship's cannons roared to life, and a massive energy blast tore through space, cutting across the distance between them and the Council flagship. The beam hit its mark, and the enemy ship erupted in a fiery explosion. Debris and wreckage scattered through space, and for a moment, it seemed as if they had won. The remaining ships faltered, unsure of what to do next. But then, another wave of enemy ships surged forward. It was clear they weren't retreating. Far from it. The Council fleet was regrouping for a final strike. The energy levels in the warship's core were rising again, dangerously close to critical levels. Lila knew they couldn't keep this up much longer. If they didn't act fast, the ship would overload. "Ezra, stabilize the core," Lila shouted. "We can't keep using this much power." "I'm trying, Captain." Ezra's voice was strained. "The ship is reacting to the fight. It's feeding off the energy like it's alive. I can't control it completely." Lila's mind raced. She looked at the fleet that surrounded them. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for control over the future. The warship was too dangerous to be left in the Council's hands, but it was also too unstable to keep using at full capacity. They needed a way to stop this, once and for all. A thought struck her. The self-destruct sequence. "Prepare the self-destruct," Lila said, her voice resolute. Ezra's eyes widened. "Captain, are you sure? We can still—" "No," Lila interrupted. "We can't let them have it. If we can't win, we make sure they can't use it either." The countdown began.